The forest held its breath when Lyra sang. She didn't know this, couldn't feel the way every creature stilled, the way the wind itself seemed to bend closer to catch her melody. To her, the singing was simply survival. The only thing that made the endless days of servitude and scorn bearable. The only thing that reminded her she was still alive, still herself, despite everything the Silver Creek Pack tried to make her believe about her worthlessness. Tonight the moon hung full and heavy, a silver coin pressed against the velvet sky. Lyra sat on her usual rock by the stream, feet tucked under her thin dress, and let the first notes rise from somewhere deep in her chest. The melody had no words, needed no words. It was older than language, older than memory. A sound that bypassed her conscious mind entirely, and flowed directly from whatever broken, defective thing lived inside her where a wolf should be. The pack healers had examined her dozens of times throughout her childhood, always reaching the same conclusion with disappointed shakes of their heads. No wolf, no shift, no future. Just a strange, hollow emptiness where her lupine nature should reside, making her less than Omega, less than anything. A wolfless wolf, they called her. An impossibility that somehow existed. A cruel joke of the moon goddess herself. She sang to that goddess now, not in prayer exactly, but in defiance. If you made me this way, she thought as her voice climbed higher, spiraling into the night, then at least hear me. At least acknowledge what you created. The melody shifted, became something haunting and wild, and Lyra closed her eyes, letting it consume her. This was the only time she felt whole, felt real, felt like maybe there was purpose to her existence beyond scrubbing floors and enduring the casual cruelty of wolves who could never understand what it meant to be permanently broken. Then the spirits answered. They always did, though she'd told no one about this part, this secret that would surely get her killed if anyone discovered it. The air shimmered, and Lyra opened her eyes to see them, translucent figures forming in the moonlight. Ancient wolves with eyes like stars and fur that seemed woven from silver threads and shadow. They circled her slowly, their movements impossibly graceful, and their voices joined hers in harmonies that made her bones vibrate and her skin prickle with something between terror and ecstasy. They sang of things she couldn't comprehend, words in languages dead before her great-grandmother's grandmother was born. But somehow the meaning seeped into her consciousness anyway. Warnings, promises, prophecies she didn't want to understand. The spirits were growing more insistent lately, their visits longer, their messages more urgent. Something was coming, they whispered between the notes of her song. Something that would shatter the careful distance between the living world and the realm of the dead. Something that required her, specifically her, though she couldn't imagine what a powerless Omega could possibly do to affect the cosmic balance they seemed so concerned about. She was nothing. She was no one. She was barely tolerated by her own pack, kept alive only because even Silver Creek wouldn't stoop to murdering a packless Omega outright, though there were days Lyra wished they would, and spare her the slow death of their disdain. Tonight the spirits seemed almost frantic, pressing closer than they'd ever dared, their ethereal forms brushing against her skin like cool mist. Their song took on an edge of desperation, and Lyra felt her own voice rising to match their intensity, the melody becoming something powerful and strange, something that made the trees bend and the water in the stream begin to glow with pale phosphorescence. She should stop. She knew she should stop. This was too visible, too obvious, but she couldn't seem to control it anymore. The song had taken on a life of its own, and she was just its vessel, its instrument, helpless before the force flowing through her. That was when she heard it. The sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, approaching through the underbrush. The spirits vanished instantly, winking out of existence like snuffed candles, and Lyra's song died in her throat, leaving only the echo of its final note hanging in the suddenly silent forest. Terror flooded her veins. Someone had heard. Someone had seen. She was dead. She was finally dead. And part of her was almost relieved even as panic made her heart hammer against her ribs. The figure that emerged from the shadows was not from her pack. She knew this immediately, instinctively, even before she saw his face. The power radiating from him was like nothing she'd ever encountered, a crushing weight of dominance that made her want to bare her throat in submission, even though she had no wolf to respond to his obvious alpha status. He was tall, powerfully built, with dark hair that fell across a face carved from sharp angles and harder expressions. His eyes found hers across the small clearing, and Lyra felt the world tilt sideways. Those eyes were the color of amber lit from within, ancient and knowing and fixed on her with an intensity that stripped away every defense she'd ever built. Alpha Kyle, first of his name, king of the Northern Territories, hadn't meant to wander this far from Silver Creek's packhouse. He'd arrived that afternoon for what was supposed to be a straightforward political negotiation, an alliance that would strengthen both packs against the growing threat of rogue attacks along their shared borders. It should have been simple, transactional, the kind of thing he'd done 100 times before without incident. But something had drawn him from his assigned quarters, pulled him into the forest with an urgency he couldn't explain or resist. And then he'd heard the singing. If you're enjoying this story, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us bring you more supernatural romance stories every week. The voice had reached inside his chest and wrapped around his heart like a fist. His wolf, normally a controlled and disciplined presence, had surged forward with unprecedented force, howling its recognition and need. Mate, it screamed in his mind. Mate, mate, mate. The word echoed through every cell of his body, undeniable and absolute. Cale had tried to resist, tried to turn back, because this was impossible. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now, not when he was in the middle of delicate political negotiations, and certainly not with whatever Omega was making that otherworldly sound. But his wolf wouldn't be denied, and his feet had carried him forward against his better judgment, drawn like a moth to flame, helpless before the siren call of that voice. Now he stood frozen, staring at the girl on the rock, and everything he'd thought he knew about mate bonds, shattered and reformed into something entirely new. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional prettiness, all sharp bones and wild dark hair, and eyes too large for her thin face. Eyes that held depths of sorrow and defiance that made something in his chest ache. But it was more than her appearance. It was the way moonlight seemed to cling to her skin, the way the air around her still shimmered with residual magic, the way his wolf was practically clawing its way out of his skin in its desperate need to claim her, protect her, mark her as his. Lyra knew she should run. Every instinct she possessed screamed at her to flee, but her body refused to obey, pinned in place by the weight of his gaze. She recognized him now, had heard the whispers racing through the pack house all day about the Alpha King's arrival, the most powerful wolf in the Northern Hemisphere, a leader known for his strategic brilliance and ruthless efficiency. He could snap her neck without breaking a sweat, could order her execution, and no one would question it. She was nothing to someone like him. Less than nothing, not even worth the breath it would take to condemn her. But he wasn't attacking. He was just standing there, staring at her with an expression she couldn't decipher, something between shock and wonder, and a hunger that made her skin flush hot, despite the cool night air. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, barely controlled, like each word cost him something. Vital. Tell me your name. It wasn't really a question, more a command, but delivered with a strange gentleness that confused her more than outright aggression would have. Lyra found her voice, though it came out barely above a whisper. Lyra. No family name, because she had none. No lineage worth claiming. Just Lyra, the broken Omega, the wolfless nothing that sang to the moon because she had nothing and no one else. She waited for his disgust, for the inevitable dismissal, but it didn't come. Instead, he moved closer, each step measured and careful, like he was approaching something precious and fragile that might shatter if startled. How long have you been able to do that? He gestured vaguely at the clearing. at the lingering traces of magic that only someone as powerful as him would be able to sense. The spirits, he meant. The singing that called them. Lyra's throat closed with fear. He'd seen everything. Heard everything. She was dead. She was absolutely dead, because what she did was probably forbidden, probably some kind of dark magic or corruption that would justify any punishment he chose to inflict. "I don't know what you mean," she lied. Badly. And his eyes narrowed. "Don't." His voice was harder now, carrying the full weight of his authority. "Don't lie to me. I heard them. Saw them. The spirits of the ancient wolves, responding to your call. That's not something that happens by accident, little Omega. That's not something that happens at all, according to every piece of wolf lore I've ever studied. So I'll ask again. How long have you been able to do this?" Lyra's hands twisted in her lap, her whole body trembling now. "Since I was a child. Since before I understood what I was seeing. They come when I sing. I don't know why. I don't know what I am. The pack healers say I have no wolf, that I'm defective, broken. But the spirits come anyway, and they try to tell me things I can't understand. And I just wanted to be left alone. I wasn't trying to cause trouble. Please don't tell Alpha Marcus, please, he'll kill me if he knows." The words tumbled out in a rush, desperate and disjointed, and Cale felt something fierce and protective surge through him. Marcus, the Silver Creek Alpha, was known for his traditionalist views and casual cruelty toward those he deemed weak. The thought of this girl, his mate, his fated other half, living under that bastard's authority, made Cale's wolf snarl with rage. No one would hurt her again. No one would dismiss her or diminish her, or make her feel like she was anything less than extraordinary. He would burn down this entire pack before he let that happen. But first he needed her to trust him, needed her to understand what she was to him, what they were to each other. He closed the remaining distance between them and knelt before her rock, bringing his eyes level with hers, letting her see the truth written plainly across his face. "You're not broken, Lyra. You're not defective. You're something far more rare, far more precious than anyone in this ignorant pack could possibly comprehend. You're a moon singer, the first one born in over 300 years. The words meant nothing to her. He could see the confusion written across her delicate features, the lack of recognition. Of course she didn't know. How could she, when the knowledge had been lost to time, buried in ancient texts that even most alphas never bothered to read? Cale had only encountered the legends in his own extensive studies. Dusty. Accounts of wolves blessed by the moon goddess herself, individuals who could bridge the gap between the physical and spiritual realms, who could commune with the ancestors and channel their wisdom and power. Moon singers had been revered in the old times, protected and honored, their gifts seen as sacred, but they'd vanished from the bloodlines centuries ago, their existence fading into myth. Until now, until this impossible girl sitting before him, radiating latent power she didn't even know. She possessed, marked by destiny for purposes neither of them could fully grasp yet, and she was his mate. The moon goddess had a twisted sense of humor, or perhaps a perfect one, binding him to the one wolf in existence who might actually be his equal, his match, even if she couldn't see it yet. "I don't understand," Lyra whispered, and Cale reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, to refuse his touch. When she didn't move, he took her small, cold hand in his larger one, and the contact sent electricity racing up his arm, the mate bond snapping into place with almost painful intensity. She gasped, feeling it too, her eyes going wide with shock and something that might have been terror or wonder or both. "You will," he promised, his thumb stroking across her knuckles in a gesture of comfort and possession both. "I'll help you understand everything, Lyra. What you are, what you can do, why the spirits answer your call. But first you need to know something else. Something that's going to complicate both our lives considerably." He paused, watching her carefully, wanting to remember this moment, this last instant before everything changed forever. "You're my mate, my true mate, chosen by the moon goddess herself, and I'm not leaving here without you. The declaration hung in the air between them. Impossible and irrefutable. Lyra felt like she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what he was saying. Mate, the word every wolf dreamed of. The bond that was. Supposed to be sacred and unbreakable and perfect. But she wasn't a wolf, was she? She was nothing. Nobody. A broken thing that couldn't shift and didn't belong anywhere. This had to be a mistake. A cruel joke. Because the Alpha King couldn't possibly be bound to someone like her. But the feeling in her chest said otherwise. The warmth spreading through her body everywhere their skin touched. The way her heart seemed to beat in rhythm with his. The sudden, overwhelming sense of rightness that terrified her more than anything else. It was real. Somehow, impossibly, it was real. Before she could formulate a response, the sound of approaching voices shattered the moment. Multiple wolves, moving through the forest with purpose, drawn by either the lingering magic or perhaps just the Alpha King's absence from the pack house. Cale's expression hardened, and he stood smoothly, positioning himself between Lyra and the direction of the sounds. A clear gesture of protection that made her chest tighten with emotions she had no names for. Alpha Marcus emerged first, flanked by his beta and several enforcers, his expression a mix of concern and carefully concealed irritation. Alpha Cale, we were worried when you didn't return. Is everything all right? His eyes flicked to Lyra with barely concealed contempt. And Cale felt his wolf surge forward, dominance radiating from him in waves that made every wolf present, except Marcus, take an instinctive step back. Everything is fine, Cale said, his voice carrying the unmistakable edge of command. I was taking a walk and encountered Miss Lyra here. We were just having a conversation. The territorial possessiveness in his tone was impossible to miss. And he saw Marcus's eyes narrow with calculation. The Silver Creek Alpha was many things, but he wasn't stupid. He could sense something had shifted, though he clearly couldn't guess the full truth. Lyra, Marcus said, his voice dripping with false concern. You should return to the pack house. It's not safe for someone like you to be out alone at night. The implication was clear. Someone like you. Someone worthless, powerless, not worth protecting or worrying about except as an inconvenience. Cale's hands clenched into fists, and it took every ounce of his considerable self-control not to rip the other alpha's throat out on the spot. She's safe with me, Cale said flatly. In fact, Lyra will be accompanying me back to the Northern Territories when I leave tomorrow. I have need of her. Particular skills. The lie came smoothly. Practiced, though it wasn't really a lie. He did have need of her. Just not in any way Marcus could comprehend. He needed her like he needed air. Like his wolf needed the moon. With an intensity that bordered on madness. The clearing went silent. Marcus's face cycled through several expressions. Surprise, confusion, and finally a calculating greed that made Cale's skin crawl. I'm sure we can come to some arrangement, the Silver Creek Alpha said. Carefully. Lyra is, of course, a valued member of our pack. Any compensation for her services would need to be discussed. She's not a commodity to be bargained over, Cale said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. And she's coming with me regardless of your opinion on the matter. Unless you'd like to challenge my authority on this. He let the threat hang in the air. Let Marcus see exactly how close he was to crossing a line that would end very badly for everyone involved. If you'd like to. See how this confrontation resolves and witness the journey that follows. Don't forget to leave a comment below with your thoughts. What do you think will happen next? Marcus backed down, as Cale knew he would. The Silver Creek Alpha might be cruel and power-hungry, but he wasn't suicidal. Going up against the Alpha King in direct confrontation would be the end of both him and his pack. Of course, Alpha Cale, he said, his tone carefully neutral now. If Lyra is willing to go, I see no reason to. Object. He looked at her directly for the first time, and the cold warning in his eyes was unmistakable. She was being given a choice, but only technically. Refuse the Alpha King and face Marcus's wrath for embarrassing him in front of his enforcers, or accept and face whatever unknown fate awaited her in the Northern Territories. Lyra understood the game being played, understood she was a pawn caught between two powerful forces, but when she looked at Kyle, when she felt the warmth of the mate, bond still thrumming through her veins, the choice became obvious. Whatever awaited her with him couldn't possibly be worse than what she'd endure if she stayed. And some small, hopeful part of her she'd thought long dead whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was what she'd been waiting for all along, what the spirits had been trying to prepare her for. "I'll go," she said quietly, and watched Cale's entire body relax fractionally, relief flashing across his features before he schooled them back to neutrality. "Good," Marcus said, his smile not reaching his eyes. Then it settled. "Lyra, gather your things. You leave at dawn." He turned back to Cale, already shifting into political mode, no doubt planning how to spin this situation to his advantage. "Perhaps we could discuss the alliance terms over dinner. Alpha Kyle, I believe we can reach a mutually beneficial arrangement." Kyle nodded curtly, playing along with the pretense of normalcy, even as his wolf raged at being forced to leave his mate's side even temporarily. He caught Lyra's eyes one more time, trying to communicate reassurance, promise, protection, everything he couldn't say out loud with witnesses present. "Tomorrow," he mouthed, and she nodded almost imperceptibly, understanding passing between them despite the chaos and confusion. The walk back to the pack house felt endless. Lyra trailed behind the group of males, her mind racing with everything that had just happened, trying to make sense of the impossible. Mate, Moonsinger, Northern Territories. Each concept felt equally unreal, equally terrifying. She should be panicking, should be planning to run, but instead she felt almost calm, as if some deeper part of her recognized this as inevitable, as right, despite how insane it all seemed on the surface. The pack house was buzzing with activity when they arrived, wolves moving through the hallways with the nervous energy that always accompanied important visitors. Lyra slipped away to her small room in the servants' quarters, a space barely larger than a closet that held only a narrow bed and a trunk for her few possessions. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands shaking now that she was alone, and tried to breathe through the surge of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. A moonsinger. She turned the words over in her mind, testing them, trying to feel if they fit. The spirits had been trying to tell her something all along, she realized. Their urgency, their increasingly desperate attempts to communicate. They'd known this was coming, known she would need to understand what she was before she could embrace her destiny. But understanding felt impossible when she'd spent her entire life being told she was nothing. Sleep didn't come that night. Lyra lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the pull of the mate bond like a physical tether connecting her to wherever Cale was in the pack house. She wondered if he could feel it too, if he was lying awake in some guest room thinking about her the way she couldn't stop thinking about him. "Probably not," whispered the cruel voice of self-doubt she'd carried for so long. He was an alpha king, powerful and important, with responsibilities that spanned entire territories. She was just an obligation now, a mate bond he hadn't asked for and probably didn't want, binding him to someone who would only ever be a liability. But then she remembered the way he'd looked at her, the possessive protectiveness, the wonder, the hunger. That hadn't been obligation. That had been desire, want, need. Whatever else was true, whatever complications lay ahead, Cale had wanted her. The Alpha King had knelt before her, had taken her hand like it was precious, had defended her against Marcus without hesitation. That meant something. That had to mean something. Dawn came too quickly and not quickly enough. Lyra packed her few belongings, a pathetic collection that fit easily into a single worn bag, and made her way to the front of the pack house, where an impressive convoy of vehicles waited. Cale stood beside a black SUV, dressed in dark clothes that somehow made him look even more imposing in the morning light. His eyes found her immediately, tracking her approach with an intensity that made her skin heat. "Ready?" he asked when she reached him, his voice low and intimate, despite the dozen wolves bustling around them. Lyra nodded, not trusting her voice, and let him guide her into the vehicle with a hand at the small of her back. The contact sent sparks racing up her spine, and she saw his slight smile, like he'd felt it too and was pleased by her reaction. The drive north took most of the day, winding through forests and mountains that grew progressively more wild and beautiful. Kale sat beside her in the back seat, maintaining a respectful distance, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could catch the scent of him, pine and snow, and something uniquely masculine that made her wolf roar, whatever she had instead of a wolf stir with interest. They spoke little during the journey, the silence between them comfortable rather than awkward, both lost in their own thoughts about what came next. As they crossed into northern territory, Lyra felt the change in the air, a sharp clarity that made her lungs expand more fully, made colors seem brighter and sounds sharper. This land was different from the temperate forests of Silver Creek, wilder and older, with mountains that scraped the high sky and valleys where mist clung even at midday. It felt like the earth itself was more alive here, more aware, and something in her chest resonated with that ancient power. The palace, when it finally came into view, took her breath away. It wasn't a castle in the human sense, but a complex of buildings built from stone and timber that seemed to grow organically from the mountainside, as if they'd always been there and always would be. Waterfalls cascaded down the cliffs behind it, their roar constant background music, and the setting sun painted everything in shades of gold and crimson. Home, Kyle said quietly, and there was a wealth of emotion in that single word. Pride, yes, but also burden. The weight of responsibility for everyone and everything within these borders. Lyra looked at him and saw not just the powerful Alpha King, but a man who carried the safety of thousands on his shoulders, who made impossible decisions and lived with their consequences, who was bound by duty in ways she was only beginning to comprehend. The vehicle stopped in the main courtyard, and immediately wolves appeared, guards and servants and advisors, all radiating varying degrees of power and competence. Kyle stepped out first, then offered his hand to help Lyra down, a gesture of respect that didn't go unnoticed by the assembled crowd. She could feel their eyes on her, assessing, judging, wondering who she was, and why their king had brought her here. Everyone, Kale said, his voice carrying easily across the space, his tone brooking no argument or discussion. This is Lyra. She is under my personal protection, and you will treat her with the respect due to her station. Any disrespect shown to her will be considered a direct insult to me. Is that understood? A chorus of yes. Alpha King answered him, though Lyra could see the confusion and speculation in their faces. She wasn't introduced as his mate, she noticed. Wasn't identified beyond a name and a vague reference to her station, whatever that meant. Kyle must have sensed her uncertainty because his hand found the small of her back again. That same reassuring touch from earlier. Trust me, he murmured, too low for anyone else to hear. I know what I'm doing, and despite everything, despite all the very reasonable doubts and fears swirling in her mind, Lyra found that she did trust him. It was insane, probably stupid, definitely reckless, but the mate bond hummed with certainty, and she let herself lean into that feeling. He led her inside, through hallways lined with portraits of previous Alpha Kings and Queens, their painted eyes seeming to follow their progress with varying degrees of approval. The palace was beautiful, but imposing, every inch of it designed to project power and permanence, a physical manifestation of the Northern Territory's strength. They climbed stairs and traversed corridors, until finally Kale stopped before a set of ornate double doors. These will be your rooms, he said, pushing the doors, open to reveal a suite that was larger than the entire servants' quarters back at Silver Creek. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the mountains, and the furnishings were elegant without being ostentatious, clearly chosen for comfort as well as aesthetics. It's close to my own quarters, he continued, and she could hear the slight hesitation in his voice, the unspoken question, close enough that I can reach you quickly if you need me. Lyra stepped inside, trying to process the sudden change in her circumstances. Yesterday she'd been sleeping in a closet, scrubbing floors, invisible and insignificant. Today she was standing in rooms fit for royalty, under the personal protection of the most powerful wolf in the north. The disconnect was dizzying. Why are you doing this? She asked, turning to face him. The mate bond. I understand that part, but you could have just claimed me and been done with it. You didn't have to bring me here, didn't have to give me rooms like these, didn't have to protect me from your own people. Why go to all this trouble for someone like me? Cale stepped into the room, closing the distance between them with that same predatory grace she'd noticed in the forest. Because you're not just someone, Lyra. You're my mate, yes, but you're also a moonsinger, which makes you inherently valuable beyond any mate bond. Your gifts could change everything for our people, could help us in ways I'm only beginning to understand. But more than that, he reached out and cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone in a gesture that made her breath catch. Because you deserve to be protected and valued and treated with care, not because of what you can do for me, but because of who you are. Because when I look at you, I see strength and resilience, and a spirit that refused to be broken, even when everything and everyone around you tried to crush it. That's worth protecting. You're worth protecting. The words hit her like a physical blow. So, different from everything she'd been taught to believe about herself, Lyra felt tears prick her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously, not wanting to cry in front of him, not wanting to show that kind of weakness. But Cale saw anyway, and his expression softened even further. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You're safe here. You're allowed to feel things, allowed to let your guard down. No one's going to hurt you for showing emotion." That was what finally broke her. The gentleness, the permission, the absolute certainty in his voice. The tears came, and with them a release of tension she'd been carrying for so long. She'd forgotten what it felt like to exist without it. Cale pulled her against his chest, his arms coming around her in a hold that was protective rather than constraining, and Lyra let herself take comfort from him, let herself feel the strength of the mate bond wrapping around them both like a blanket. They stood like that for a long time, Lyra crying silently against his chest, while Kyle held her and murmured reassurances in a language she didn't recognize, but somehow understood anyway. When the tears finally subsided, she felt hollowed out, but also lighter, like crying had purged something toxic from her system. She pulled back slightly, embarrassed now. But Cale kept his arms loose around her waist, not letting her retreat too far. "Thank you," she whispered, and he shook his head. "You don't need to thank me for basic decency, Lyra, but you're welcome anyway." He hesitated, then continued. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you have questions and concerns and probably no small amount of fear about what happens next. I want you to know that I'm not going to force anything. The mate bond is powerful, but it doesn't override your agency or your right to choose. We'll take this at whatever pace you need." The consideration in his words, the respect for her autonomy, meant more than he could possibly know. "What happens now?" she asked. "Practically speaking, I mean. What do you expect from me?" "Now," Cale said, "you rest and recover from everything you've been through. Tomorrow I'll introduce you to my head researcher, a wolf named Elena, who specializes in ancient lore and magical bloodlines. She'll help us understand more about moonsingers and your abilities. And in the meantime, you'll be free to explore the palace and grounds, meet people, start finding your place here. No pressure, no demands, just time and space to figure things out." It sounded almost too good to be true, which made her suspicious. "And the mate bond?" she pressed. "Your court, your advisors, they're going to expect you to complete it, aren't they? To make it official?" The thought of the claiming ritual, of being marked and bound in front of witnesses, made her stomach twist with anxiety. She wasn't ready for that. Wasn't sure she'd ever be ready. "Let me worry about my court," Kyle said firmly. "They serve me, not the other way around. And yes, eventually we'll need to make an announcement and complete the bond, but not until you're ready. Not until you want it as much as I do." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "I won't lie to you, Lyra. I want you. The mate bond is driving my wolf half insane with the need to claim you, to mark you as mine in every way possible. But I'm not an animal ruled only by instinct. I can wait. I will wait, for as long as it takes for you to feel safe and sure with me. The honesty was refreshing. And terrifying in equal measure. Lyra nodded slowly, accepting his words, choosing to trust them even though trust didn't come easily after a lifetime of betrayal and disappointment. "Okay," she said. "Okay. We'll take it slow. And Kyle, I appreciate that more than you know." His smile was warm and genuine, transforming his usually stern features into something almost boyish. "Good," he said. "Now I'm going to let you rest. There's a bathroom through that door, and the closets should have everything you need for now. We'll get you properly fitted for clothes tomorrow. If you need anything at all, anything, just pull this cord and someone will come immediately." He indicated a braided rope near the bed, part of the palace's old-fashioned but effective servant summoning system. He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at her with an expression that made her heart skip. "Sleep well, Lyra, and welcome home." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving her alone in the magnificent rooms that were apparently hers now. Lyra stood in the center of the space, slowly turning to take it all in. The enormous bed with its mountain of pillows, the plush rugs covering polished wood floors, the fireplace already laid with wood waiting to be lit, the desk and seating area and views that seemed to stretch forever. Home, Kyle had called it. Could this really become home? Could she really belong somewhere like this, to someone like him? The spirits chose that moment to make their presence known, appearing more corporeal than usual in the growing twilight. The largest one, a massive silver wolf with eyes like galaxies, moved close and pressed its ethereal head against her hand. She felt rather than heard its message. "You are where you need to be, child of moon and music. The journey ahead will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine. But know this, you were made for these trials. Your song will save 2 worlds, but first you must learn to sing with full voice, without fear, without shame. Trust the bond. Trust your power. Trust yourself." Then they faded, leaving Lyra with more questions than answers, but also a strange sense of peace. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own revelations. But tonight, for the first time in her life, she would sleep in a real bed, in a safe place, with a mate who valued her. It was more than she'd ever dared hope for. It was, perhaps, the beginning of everything. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the continuation of Lyra and Kale's story. Things are about to get much more complicated. The next morning dawned bright and cold, sunlight streaming through the massive windows and painting everything in shades of gold. Lyra woke slowly, confused for a moment about where she was, then remembered everything in a rush that made her burrow deeper into the luxurious blankets. It hadn't been a dream. She was really here, in the Northern Territory Palace, claimed as mate by an alpha king, who barely knew her, but seemed determined to protect her anyway. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, sitting up and trying to smooth her wild hair into something less chaotic. A young woman entered, carrying a tray laden with food that smelled absolutely divine. "Good morning, Miss Lyra," the woman said with a warm smile. "I'm Sarah, one of the palace staff. Alpha Kale asked me to bring you breakfast and see if you needed anything." She set the tray on the small table near the window, then gestured to the bathroom. "I've also drawn you a bath, and there are fresh clothes laid out. The Alpha King requests your presence in his study at your convenience, but there's no rush. Take your time." Lyra thanked her, still not quite comfortable with being served, and Sarah left with another smile. The breakfast was incredible, far better than anything she'd eaten at Silver Creek, and Lyra found herself actually enjoying the meal rather than just refueling. The bath was even better. Hot water and scented oils that made her skin feel soft and clean in a way she'd almost forgotten was possible. The clothes fit perfectly. Simple, but well-made. Soft fabrics that didn't itch or bind. When she finally made her way to Kyle's study, guided by a helpful guard who seemed unsurprised by her presence, she found the Alpha King bent over a massive desk covered in maps and documents. He looked up when she entered, and his face transformed with a smile that made her chest warm. "Good morning," he said, standing immediately. "Did you sleep well?" Better than she'd expected, actually. The bed was comfortable, and despite her racing thoughts, exhaustion had eventually won. "Yes," she said. "Thank you. For everything. The rooms, the clothes, all of it." Kyle waved off her thanks, moving around the desk to greet her properly. He didn't touch her, but she could feel the pull of the mate bond, the desire to close the distance between them. "Soon," his wolf seemed to whisper. "Soon. There's someone I want you to meet," he said instead. "Elena, our head researcher. She's been up all night going through the archives about Moonsingers. Come, she's waiting in the library." The library was spectacular. Multiple stories of books that climbed toward vaulted ceilings, with ladders and galleries and reading nooks scattered throughout. Elena turned out to be an older woman with sharp eyes and an air of barely contained excitement. "A moon singer," she breathed when introduced to Lyra, her gaze assessing but kind. "I never thought I'd see one in my lifetime. My dear, do you have any idea how extraordinary you are?" Lyra shook her head mutely, and Elena laughed. "Well, we're going to fix that. Come, sit. I have so much to show you, so much to explain." The next several hours passed in a blur of ancient texts and careful explanations. Moonsingers, Elena told her, were wolves blessed with a unique connection to the spiritual realm. They could commune with the ancestral spirits, channel their power, and in times of great need, serve as bridges between the living and the dead. Their songs could heal, could protect, could even raise the spirits of fallen warriors to fight again, though that last ability came with enormous cost and was rarely attempted. "But here's what's most important," Elena said, her expression growing serious. "Moonsingers don't manifest because they lack a wolf. They manifest because they have something even more powerful. Your wolf isn't absent, Lyra. It's dormant, wrapped in so much spiritual energy that it can't emerge in the normal way. When you finally shift, and you will shift, you'll be unlike any wolf anyone has seen in centuries. Larger, stronger, with abilities that transcend normal lupine nature." The words should have been exciting, but all Lyra felt was fear. "When will I shift?" she asked. "How do I make it happen?" Elena exchanged a glance with Kale, and Lyra caught the worry in both their expressions. "That's the complication," Elena said gently. "Moonsingers typically manifest their full power during times of extreme stress or need. It's not something you can force or practice. It just happens when the time is right, when your gifts are most needed. So I'm still powerless," Lyra said flatly, "still useless in any practical sense. Just a potential instead of an actual asset." The bitterness in her voice made Kale flinch. "You're not powerless," he said firmly. "You can already do something no one else can. You can commune with the spirits, receive their guidance and warnings. That alone makes you invaluable. And the rest will come. We just need to be patient." But patience wasn't a luxury they had, as they discovered that afternoon when a scout came racing into the palace, breathless with urgency and fear. "Alpha King, there's something wrong at the northern border. The veil between worlds, it's thinning. We can see through it, see shapes moving on the other side. The spirits are restless, and some of them are trying to cross over. The pack station there says they can hear singing, but it's not like any wolf song they've ever heard. It's driving them mad." Kyle was moving before the scout finished speaking, barking orders to assemble his best warriors and prepare for immediate departure. Lyra stood frozen, Elena's hand on her shoulder, watching him transform from attentive mate to commanding king in the space of a heartbeat. "This is what the spirits have been warning you about," Elena whispered. "The barrier breaking down, two worlds colliding. You're going to be needed sooner than any of us hoped." Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs as Kale strode toward her, already dressed for battle, power radiating from every line of his body. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice brooking no argument. "Stay in the palace where it's safe. Elena will look after you." But even as he said it, Lyra knew it was wrong, knew with bone-deep certainty that whatever was happening at the border, she needed to be there. The spirits confirmed it, their voices suddenly loud in her mind, urgent and insistent. "Go," they commanded. "Your song is needed. The veil will not hold without your voice." "No," Lyra said, surprising herself with the firmness in her tone. "No, I'm coming with you." Kyle's expression hardened. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. You have no training, no ability to defend yourself. I won't risk you." But Lyra stepped forward, meeting his eyes without flinching. "You said I was a moon singer, that my gifts could help your people. This is what I'm meant to do, Kale. I can feel it. The spirits are calling me to the border. And if I don't go, if I don't at least try to help, what was the point of bringing me here?" The logic was irrefutable, even if he hated it. Kale's jaw clenched, his wolf warring with his reason, protection instincts battling against the truth of her words. "Fine," he bit out, "but you stay by my side every second. You don't take a single step without my permission. And if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments, no hesitation. Understood?" Lyra nodded, relief and terror flooding her in equal measure. Understood. The journey to the northern border took less than an hour in wolf form, the pack moving as a coordinated unit through territory they knew intimately. Kale had insisted on carrying Lyra since she couldn't shift, his massive wolf form easily bearing her weight as he ran. She clung to his fur, feeling the power in every stride, the absolute confidence with which he navigated the treacherous mountain paths. The other wolves gave them space, but maintained a protective formation, clearly taking their king's mate's safety as seriously as he did. They felt the wrongness before they saw it. The air grew thick and strange, pressure building like before a storm, but without any clouds overhead. The temperature dropped precipitously, frost forming on the ground despite the afternoon sun. And then they heard it, the singing that the scout had mentioned. But it wasn't like Lyra's melodies to the moon. This was discordant, painful, a sound that scraped against the ears and made teeth ache. The border appeared through the trees, and Lyra gasped. The veil between worlds, usually invisible, rippled like water, translucent and unstable. Through it she could see the spirit realm, a mirror of the physical world but wrong somehow, colors too bright and shadows too deep, and filled with shapes that moved with predatory purpose. Spirits. But not the benevolent ancestral wolves who answered her songs. These were something else. Something hungry and angry and desperate to cross over. The pack stationed at the border looked haggard, their eyes wild with the strain of maintaining their positions against the pressure from the other side. Their alpha, a grizzled veteran named Thomas, approached Kale with obvious relief. "Thank the goddess you're here," he said. "It's been getting worse by the hour. Whatever's over there, it wants through, and I don't know how much longer the veil can hold." Kyle set Lyra down carefully, shifting back to human form along with several of his wolves. "What happened?" he demanded. "This border's been stable for decades." Thomas shook his head helplessly. "We don't know. It started 3 days ago, small disturbances that we initially dismissed, but it's been escalating exponentially. And that singing, it started this morning. Some kind of summoning call from the other side, trying to weaken the barrier further." Lyra stepped closer to the shimmering veil, drawn by something she couldn't name. The spirit wolves who usually came to her were clustered on this side of the barrier, their forms more defined than she'd ever seen them, and they looked afraid. That shocked her more than anything else. How could spirits be afraid? What could possibly threaten beings who were already dead? The largest spirit, her usual guide, materialized beside her. "You hear it, yes? The dark singing? It is the corruption, child. The accumulation of all the anger and pain and hatred that has seeped into the spirit realm over centuries. It grows stronger, and it wants to spill into your world, to feed on the living. We have held it back for as long as we could, but our strength wanes. The barrier was never meant to bear this much weight. How do I stop it?" Lyra asked desperately. "How do I make it stronger?" The spirit's eyes, ancient and sad, fixed on hers. "You must sing, moon singer. Sing with all. The power you possess. Call upon the true spirits, the clean souls who remember their purpose. We will answer, and together we can reinforce the veil. But be warned, it will cost you. Your first true song will demand much, will awaken things inside you that cannot be put back to sleep. Are you prepared for that price? Lyra thought of Kale, of the pack huddled at the border, of Elena and Sarah and all the wolves in the territory who would suffer if the barrier failed. Thought of the spirits, her, friends even if she'd never fully understood them, and their desperate need for help. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Yes, she said firmly. I'm ready. Tell me what to do. The spirit wolf nuzzled her hand one final time. Sing from your soul, child. Sing the song you've always been meant to sing. And do not stop, no matter what happens, until the barrier holds or you fall. We will be with you. Then it stepped back, joining the other ancestral spirits in a circle around her. And Lyra felt Kale's presence at her back, his hand finding hers, squeezing once in support and trust, and something that felt dangerously close to love. She closed her eyes, reached deep into that hollow place where her wolf should be, and found instead a wellspring of power she'd never known existed. When she opened her mouth, the sound that emerged was nothing human, nothing of this world. It was the voice of the moon itself, ancient and powerful and undeniable. The song rose into the air, and the spirits answered, their voices joining hers in harmonies that made the ground shake and the trees bow. The veil stopped rippling, began to solidify, threads of silver light weaving through it where her song touched. But the dark singing from the other side intensified, fighting back, and Lyra felt something inside her crack and break open, power flooding through her body in waves that were both agonizing and exhilarating. Her back arched, her voice climbing higher, and she was dimly aware of Kale, shouting something, of wolves howling in alarm or awe, but she couldn't stop. Couldn't break the song now even if she wanted to. She was the bridge, the conduit, the living anchor between two worlds, and if she faltered, everything would fall. Light exploded from her chest, silver and brilliant, and Lyra felt her bones begin to shift, felt fur erupting across her skin, felt her body changing into something she'd never been but always should have been. Her wolf, finally, was rising. But it wasn't a normal transformation. This was transcendence, apotheosis, the full manifestation of what it meant to be a moon singer made flesh. When the light faded and the song reached its crescendo, Lyra stood on 4 legs for the first time in her life, and the wolf looking back at Kale through her eyes was enormous, pure silver white, with eyes that glowed like moonstone, and a presence that made every wolf present, alpha or omega, drop to their belly in instinctive submission. The veil sealed. With a sound like thunder, solid and strong, reinforced by the combined power of Lyra's song and the spirits who had answered her call, the dark shapes on the other side retreated, unable to penetrate the renewed barrier, and silence fell over the border like a blanket. Lyra stood swaying on her new legs, exhausted beyond measure, and felt herself begin to fall. But Kale was there, his arms catching her as she shifted back to human form. Unconscious before the transformation completed, she woke. In her rooms at the palace, sunlight streaming through the windows, suggesting at least a day had passed. Her body ached in ways she'd never experienced, like every cell had been torn apart and reassembled slightly wrong. But underneath the pain was a humming sense of rightness, of completion. Her wolf was there now, a presence in her mind that felt like coming home. "We did it," the wolf said, her voice feminine and strong. "We saved them. We proved we matter." The door opened, and Kyle entered, his expression transforming from worry to relief when he saw she was awake. "You're incredible," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed and taking her hand. "What you did at the border, Lyra, I've never seen anything like it. You saved hundreds, maybe thousands of lives. The barrier is stronger now than it's been in decades. Elena thinks your song actually repaired damage that's been accumulating for years." Lyra managed a weak smile. "I shifted," she said unnecessarily, and he laughed. a sound of pure joy. You did more than shift. You became exactly what you were always meant to be. My pack is calling you the Silver Moon, did you know that? Already you're becoming legend. She should have been pleased, but instead she felt the weight of new expectations settling onto her shoulders. I'm still learning, she said quietly. Still figuring out what all of this means. What if I can't do it again? What if that was a one-time thing? Cale's expression grew serious, and he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that made her breath catch. Then we'll figure it out together. You don't have to carry this alone, Lyra. You have me. You have Elena. You have an entire pack who's ready to support you. And more than that, he paused, his eyes intense on hers. You have a mate who's falling in love with you more every day, who sees your strength and your courage and your absolute refusal to give up, and who considers himself the luckiest wolf alive to have been chosen for you. The words hung between them, honest and vulnerable, and everything she'd been too afraid to hope for. I'm falling too, she admitted softly. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But the bond, it's not just instinct, Cale. It's real. What I feel for you is real. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face, made him look younger and lighter and so handsome her heart ached. Then we'll take our time anyway, he said. Fall at whatever speed feels right. Court each other properly. Learn each other. And when you're ready, when you're sure, we'll complete the bond and face whatever comes next as partners, as equals, as mates in every sense of the word. Lyra pulled him down, initiating their first real kiss, pouring everything she couldn't articulate into the press of lips and the tangle of tongues. The mate bond sang between them, and Lyra felt her wolf purr with contentment, felt the rightness of this man, this moment, this future spreading out before them filled with challenges, but also with hope and love and purpose. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Cale rested his forehead against hers. My queen, he whispered, and though the title wasn't official yet, Lyra felt the truth of it settle into her bones. The spirits appeared then, materializing around the bed in a protective circle, their voices harmonizing in what could only be called approval. The first battle is won, Moonsinger, her guide said. But it is only the first. The darkness will test you again in ways you cannot yet foresee. But look at what you have built already. A mate who honors you. A pack who respects you. Power you are learning to wield. And most importantly, the knowledge that you are enough, exactly as you are. These gifts will see you through what comes next. What comes next? Lyra asked, though part of her didn't want to know. The spirit's expression grew solemn. A reckoning, child. Between the living and the dead. Between justice and vengeance. Between the world that is and the world that should be. Your song will be needed again and again until the balance is restored. But tonight, rest, heal, love, and be loved. The battles can wait for dawn. They faded, and Lyra settled back against the pillows, Cale's arm around her shoulders, his presence a constant comfort. Whatever came next, whatever challenges the spirits foretold, she wouldn't face them alone. She had found her voice, her power, her wolf, her mate. She had found herself. Supernatural ability, or ancient prophecy, was the real magic. The rest would come, she knew it would, but for now, in this moment, she was exactly where she needed to be. Thank you so much for watching this story. If you enjoyed Lyra and Cale's journey, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below telling us what you think will happen next in their adventure. More supernatural romance stories are coming soon, so stay tuned. Epilogue. 6 months later, the Northern Territory celebrated its first bonding ceremony between an alpha king and his Moonsinger mate. The entire pack gathered under the full moon, witnesses to a union that represented not just personal love, but the bridge between two worlds, the promise of protection and power combined. Lyra stood before them in silver robes that caught the moonlight, no longer the broken Omega from Silver Creek, but a queen in her own right, powerful and confident, and beloved by wolves who had learned to see past hierarchy to value and worth. Kale marked her before the pack, his bite gentle but possessive on her throat, and she returned the favor, claiming him just as thoroughly. The bond snapped fully into place with an intensity that stole both their breath, tying them together in ways that transcended mere physical connection. They were two halves of one whole, balanced and complete, stronger together than either could ever be apart. The spirits sang their approval, visible to everyone, present, a silver host of ancestral wolves who blessed the union and promised their continued support. Elena wept happy tears, and even gruff Thomas smiled, seeing his king finally, truly happy. And when Lyra lifted her voice in song, the entire pack joined her, a chorus that rose to the moon and was answered with light that bathed them all in silver benediction. The darkness would come again. They all knew it. The barrier would be tested, and Lyra would be called upon to defend it with her gift and her courage. But she would not stand alone. She would have Kale at her side, a pack at her back, spirits to guide her, and the absolute certainty that she was exactly who and what she was meant to be. The Moonsinger and her king, bound by fate and choice both, ready to face whatever destiny demanded of them. Together they were unstoppable. Together they were home.